Hi guys and welcome from the SciCraft server. As you can hear, my voice is not in the best shape, but I was a little bit sick for the past week and I actually lost my voice. I'm recovering, but I thought I'll essentially show you what I've done in the past couple of weeks here on the server. So I thought the guys are doing here lots of weird and awesome projects and I thought I'll just chip in. The problem is that I don't have too much time on my hands, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Lots of different projects, lots of different live stuff, but I thought I'll help. So there is a little quarry that Ilmango and its crew is running here, and I thought I'll help. What happens is, right now the quarry is chunk loaded by just a player sitting there, but I thought why not to help to chunk load it so we can run the quarry with no player logged into the server. So our chunk loading efforts here are a little bit tricky because the quarry runs in the Nether, and to chunk load anything in the Nether we need to keep the Nether loaded even if nobody's on the server. And one way to do it is essentially you have to actually, the only way to do it is you have to keep Nether and the overworld loaded at the same time by dropping an item through a portal in the spawn chunks every now and then, every couple of seconds. That's what we are doing here. This is your typical setup that you would have if you have an iron farm, and that's the same reason you want to keep the iron farm running if nobody's logged in. And by throwing an item through the portal, you actually load two worlds that are connected by this portal, which in this case is Nether and the overworld. So that's the first part of the puzzle. It's kind of simple. Just need to drop item every now and then to the Nether, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay guys, so we are in the Nether. We are actually on the roof of the Nether. The portal that the items are going through is somewhere at the bottom of the world. We are at world 00 and that's where the portal is, exactly. And so we don't know exactly where the items are going through, so what I did is essentially chunk load those 4 chunks, assuming that items lands anywhere, because the issue with chunk loading of the quarry is that there's lots of flying machines. The flying machines break when you unload chunks in any shape or form, and if the entire quarry is chunk loaded, then we have this problem in a regular fashion that it will be possible that the quarry will essentially break by unloading a random chunk with a flying component. So we'll be using a Permaloader technology. I'll link to a video that I posted about it and explaining how it exactly works. So if you don't, so you can just follow it if you lose me at any point. But it's a little bit different. So with Permaloader, what we can achieve 2 things. First of all, we'll be able to load those chunks permanently, so they never unload. And the second thing is we'll be able to load it remotely, so without any connection to the other parts of the Nether. So in this case the quarry is in this direction where this piston bolt is going over there, and we are going actually right now chunk loading in this direction. And the reason is very simple. There is not too many projects in this direction. If you go, we are at chunk 00 obviously, and our aim is to start chunk loading using the Permaloader at chunk 50 and then go up to 100. Okay, so why 50, why 100? It's essentially you want to permaload 100 chunks of very low priority in order to protect other chunks to be unloaded. Okay, so as you can see, it's already done, because I already did this project a while ago, just kind of showing you how this all worked out. So let's meet up at the, let's just fly there. Okay, so we have here 50 chunks essentially just going to the Permaloader. So this is not a structure that we'll be actually using as a reliable way of loading chunks, although those chunks, since we are at going straight through world diagonal, are actually also priority of 0, so they are also helping us protecting other chunks from being unloaded. So we are over here. 50, okay, we're getting closer. Okay, so this is the Permaloader. Okay, so let's get down here. And the Permaloader head is essentially, in this case, 4 hoppers, chunk loaders, that chunk loading 4 chunks in a circular fashion. Okay, so we know that these chunks on the diagonal are priority 0. These chunks on the border are either 1, 3, or 7 or 15 or any of those bits, and for some reason I know that this is a priority of we did, of 7. If you are not sure about how to compute chunks of different priority, the easiest way to do it is essentially make a bigger loop, because if you're going out of the diagonal, like even one chunk, like over here, yeah, this chunk, because it's not on the diagonal, will never have chunks of priority, neither 0 or 1. So this will be at least 2 and up. Okay, so yeah, so by doing that, we'll be loading 100 chunks of priority 0 and 1, and this is chunks of priority 7, which will keep this loop spinning and loading other chunks from the Permaloader. So let's meet us on the other side of the Permaloader. Yeah. So right now it's a little bit different, because we actually want to chunk load all the chunks that are around the diagonal. So we go from every chunk through the diagonal, and also we have an extra chunk loader here to load the other chunks of the diagonal. We start, okay, and we want to continue for at least 50 chunks. So we load 50 chunks on the actual diagonal and also 50 chunks on the sides. You're getting closer. Okay, so now we are at the tail of the Permaloader, and that's essentially it. That's the entire structure. And the premise is that if we leave this area, because of that Permaloader head and this 100 chunks of low priority, that the entire structure will be loaded and will be supporting loading other structures. So I'm here a little test. I need to eat first. Okay. Setup. This is essentially way, to chunk load a single chunk, and we'll see if it works. So we have here chunks that are loading from the outside, chunk in the middle. And we have here a single hopper that has item in it, and that's pretty much it. That this hopper will be ticking this particular chunk every single tick, and this way we can test if our Permaloader is working. So we have here a bunch of slime balls, and we will fill up the bottom chest with them, and we'll do a quick test. So if we would log out in this particular area, there is a very high chance that these chunks will be unloaded by player means, which means that they will be just unloaded. But what we can do, as you can see, we have quite a bit of items here in this chest. And if we leave this area gradually, we have to go at least 20 chunks. I think we are there. And now, okay, and now I'll just log out, and we can log back in after a couple of minutes and see if all our items flow to the other chest. Okay guys, so I waited about, I don't know, half an hour maybe. I just went for coffee and I logged back in, and let's check our test chunk. So if this test chunk stayed loaded for the entire time, it'll probably make that, as you can see, oh, we can see the ticking. Yeah, so none of the items are here. Everything flow back into this chest, which indicates that this chunk actually remained loaded, although it was just a single chunk around nowhere, which means that the Permaloader structure is actually working pretty fine. So, okay, so let's go to the site and let's see how the chunk loading of the Nether Quarry went. So I think it's around, we are in the chunk minus 120, minus 110, minus 100. So we have to go towards positive X. Yeah, and we have to go about 250 chunks. So let's start flying. It's quite a ways. Let's build up a little bit of height. And we'll have to go, okay, about, yep. Okay, now we're at 0, okay. So now we can fly away until chunk 150. And that's where the quarry is. And we have to turn a little bit to the left as well. Yes, so about 150 on X and negative 120 on Z. So while we are flying there, I have to apologize to the other guys on the server a little bit, because I said, okay, I can do the chunk loading, I know how to do it. So it took me about 2 weeks to do it, and it's only like 1000 hoppers to place. The reason is very simple. I'm quite a busy guy, I have lots of my head, work, family, and I don't have too much time to do all the fun stuff that other people can actually do. And that's quite a pity. But that's what happens if you get older and if you get kids, so that's kind of a consequence. So it took me 2 weeks, but if you do it on your own, you'll probably be able to do it in, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, just to do all of it. Also, like, I got comments, like, for example, after my witchcraft project, I would questions like, for example, oh, it took you 2 months, that was a really big project to do. Not really. If you would add up all the time lapses and all the replay, which was actually essentially bulk of the work, it was about 8 to 9 hours, but it just took 2 or 3 weeks to do it, and then a couple of weeks of editing and a couple of weeks of preparation. That's essentially what happens. So don't worry, guys, if I'm not posting that often. It just means that it's life. I prefer to do quality over quantity. So okay, so when I get to the quarry, let's then meet on the other side. Okay, guys, so we are arriving at the location. We have finally managed to get here, and we didn't use any pistol bolts, just flying, which is pretty cool. I have to locate where the middle of this thing is. As you can see, all the chunk loading has already been done. As I said, I didn't have too much time to actually find a good time to record, so I apologize if I'm showing it all afterwards. Okay, so that's essentially the project here, and we are in the chunks below the quarry. And what we have here is we have those red hoppers, or red chunk loaders, and orange chunk loaders. And what difference about them is, what we have here around is we have a ring of those red chunk loaders that go in a loop around the entire quarry, and this extends 2 chunks on all sides out. The reason is we want the entire quarry to be entity processing. We have some minecarts running around, we have some TNT blowing, and we just don't want any of those things to just don't work. Or if, for example, with the quarry itself drags some gravel, we want the gravel to fall properly as an entity. So we have extended it by 2 chunks, as I said, and this red circle is our loop, is our main loop, and then these orange bits are essentially connecting each chunk. Let me turn on chunk borders, so they're at the border of each chunk, they are connecting each chunk with other end of the loop. So what happens here, let me land here, is in this entire structure, every single chunk can potentially load the entire structure. So if we would log out, for example, in this area, nothing would happen, because player can only unload, or game can only unload 100 chunks at a time, and we are here having about 1000 chunks chunk loaded, which means that only 100 will be selected for unloading and unloaded, and the rest, because there will be chunks that are loaded, they stay loaded with the hoppers, they will essentially send a signal back around, and we can actually load the entire structure just from any single chunk, because the signal will go into this loop, the loop will go back on and go around. So right now, everything, as you can see, the entire structure is it's actually impossible to unload. But what happens here? That's super weird. Okay, so if we turn this off, essentially, if we lock those hoppers, then we will actually break this peak loop, which means that these chunks will be able to be unloaded again. So in this case, now I unlocked these hoppers, which means that entire area is being loaded, and which means that we can actually run the quarry if we want, and everything should be nicely chunk loaded. So we are not connected to spawn in any means, or to the 00, but that's fine, because these chunks will be loading themselves, which means that we'll be actually sustaining ourselves this big area. Okay, so let me go down and see how the quarry is doing. So as far as I know, like at this point now the quarry is turned off, have to jump to this hole. Yeah, it looks pretty sweet. The entire view is pretty great. You can see the quarry did quite a bit of job clearing all this area. As you can see, I changed my texture pack for the netherrack, so it is at least visible. And as you can see, there are no hostile mobs, and the reason is because we have our hostile mob switch, like a mobile hostile mob switch, shulker box, thingy-magic. Here up top you have here 2 flying machines. You can hear. Because they are loaded also in the quarry area, this means also that they are also a hostile mob switch for the entire nether, and they are mobile because we can move them because they are on the flying machines. Okay, so the issue here with chunk loading, so this area is chunk loaded, but if you have a player moving around like I'm moving right now from chunk to chunk, I will be causing sections of the area around me, if it's outside of the view distance, to unload, which means that walking here as a player is actually dangerous for the quarry. It's actually better if there's nobody in this area. Okay, so the thing is, when the quarry is running and the quarry is chunk loaded, you can only enter the area, you cannot move back, and you have to turn off the quarry, and when it makes sure that it's turned off, we can then actually turn it back on again, and then with a delay log out or move away from here and make sure that everything is nicely loaded only with hoppers, because this only ensures that these chunks will be permanently loaded. Okay, so let me get downstairs and let me do some marks. So right now the quarry is in this moment. Okay, so let's leave some blocks. We have some cobble here, so let's do 1, 2. Okay, yes, so let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so we have here 8 blocks, and we'll see how the quarry is doing. So now we have to turn the quarry on, and in this case I'll just log out. Okay, so we are, guys, at the bottom of the quarry, in the room that was used to be to AFK. I added a little bit of delay here just to make sure that the area that I'm loading myself as a player can be actually unloaded when I log back out. And now, right now the quarry is turned off, but by flicking this lever I'll actually turn it on. And don't worry, like, I wouldn't even trust myself running the actual quarry on the actual server. So this is the world backup, and I'm running on the carpet mod, which allows me to actually check how the unloading works. So I can do unload nether, and as you can see, we are nicely loading the nether, which is here. We have here our Permaloader, which runs all the chunks of our order 0 safely in the first 100 chunks, and then we have our quarry around this area, chunk loaded as well. Some of this by my means, and some of this by hoppers, because outside of the render distance at this point. And that's great, which means that our chunk loading is working fine. So I can just turn the lever on and flee, and we'll put the marker over there so see how it's going. So I'll just turn it on and log out, and hopefully everything goes well. Hopefully this test works. Okay, guys, so I'm logging in after, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. We have to load a little bit. Okay, I think we're good. Now we can turn off the quarry, and since we are on the test server, let's go into game mode 3, and we can see if it all worked out. So you can see we are below. That's all this terrain that needs to be mined, but that's fine. And as you can see, yeah, quarry is chugging along, and chugging along pretty well. As you can see, oh, it's actually moving blocks. Where did we end? So we put 8 blocks of cobblestone as a marker. As you can see, it's shoved in 4 layers, which is pretty awesome. And as you can see, quarry is chugging along. You can see some ghost blocks art, but that's not pretty art. So as you can see, this part of the quarry is coming here, and the quarry is stopped. So when these guys park, everything should stop and everything should be fine. Let's enjoy the art, the ghost block art. You can pretty much do nothing about it. and it stopped. Yeah, awesome. So as you can see, we successfully managed to run the test, which means that the quarry doesn't need to be loaded by any player, and that will be very useful. And as you can see, like any project that doesn't require user presence in a per se, like for example when you have mob spawning or crops growing, then you need a player to actively do those ticks and do those spawns. But in any other projects that you don't need a player, we can actually chunk load pretty much anything. And as you can see, quarry looks pretty mighty at this point and will be mined in about 2 months, as Ilmango is saying, and we will not need anybody to be around this area. And because of the Permaloader that we did around starting from chunk -50 to -100, and we are essentially going on the diagonal to that Permaloader, which means that we have actually 2 Permaloaders. One goes from 0, second goes from 50, which means that pretty much it will be really hard to break at, because if you load the Permaloader, there is a chance that these chunks will be unloaded, but there are more chunks than necessary actually to run the Permaloading, which means that we should be fine. So guys, our test became successful, so that's great, which means that now we can chunk load the entire quarry remotely, not connected to 0, so we don't need any player to actually be around this area to have this all running. It will be running for at least 2 months from now, so that's pretty awesome that we could do that. We could help the other guys chip into the existing projects. And so if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, share and subscribe if you haven't done it already, and see you in the next one. Bye bye!